Hi everybody. In this video I'm going to show you how to use a speed variable to control jumping in Gravity and give it a more realistic appearance, and also how to get that same thing to work with platforming. And I'll also incorporate some custom blocks that where you make your own blocks, just to help organize some of this stuff as it starts to get a little more complicated. So let's get started. So first I'm just going to set up basic motion. This is all stuff you would have seen before, right? My sprite is going to have forever if, and if keys are pressed, it's going to move. So I'm just going to use W, A, S, and D as my up, down, left, right. So I've got A for left, I could change X by a negative number. I think what I'm actually going to do is have it point and move. That way it turns and faces a certain direction. So I'll do point in direction negative 90, so it points to the left, and then moves 10 steps, and I'll use D, go to the right. That'll be the same thing, except it'll point to the right. And I'm going to have to, my sprite is going to flip upside down because it's rotating as it turns to the left. So I'm going to just click this double arrow thing to lock it so that it can only point left and right. All right, so I've got my basic left-right movement. Now I need to start adding. I need to add the jumping. So instead of doing it the way we did it before with the super simple jump in Gravity, like we did in the that kind of copy of the T-Rex game, the no internet game, where it was just jumping over an obstacle. The animation wasn't very good. It kind of almost just like glitched straight up and then fell in a straight line, and that doesn't look very realistic, and we can do better than that. So the way I'm going to make it better is by controlling the Y speed for when the sprite jumps and falls with a variable. So I'm going to have to create a variable, and I'm going to call it Y speed. And so this variable is going to control how fast the sprite moves along the y-axis. So in fact, inside my forever loop, I'm just going to have a change y by block. It's currently just flying away, but it's just going to change by y speed at all times. So when its y speed is 0, you'll notice it's not going anywhere because its y speed is 0. It's just changing by nothing. When y speed is positive, it goes up. When y speed is negative, it goes down. And so instead of changing the y position directly by saying just change y by 10 or change y by 20 or whatever, we're just going to set that variable and change that variable and indirectly change how fast it's moving along the y-axis. And because we can do that sort of gradually, it can sort of gradually go up and gradually go down, and we can change it. The changes won't be as sudden and won't look as glitchy. So the next thing I think I'll add is I'll add the ability to jump. In order to do that, I'm going to add another if space key is pressed, I want it to jump. Now, the thing with jumping is there are a few different conditions that have to be true in order for it to jump. Let's kind of start. First of all, the space key has to be pressed, but we don't want it to always jump when the space key is pressed. We only want it to be able to jump once. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I just simply, if space key is pressed, set Y speed, pick a number like, I think something like 14 or 15. They've already set this up, so I think 14 will work. If I just press the space key, it just kind of flies away, right? We don't always want we don't want to just press the space key and the Y speed variable is just set to 14 and it stays that way. So for one thing, we need gravity. We need to add the ability for it to fall down. So I'm also going to have to add another if. And if the Y position is up in the air, gravity is going to pull it back down. So if the Y position is greater than, let me choose where I want the floor to be. Let me set this back to 0. So if if Y position is greater than, I want this floor to be -92. Your floor may differ because you might have a different sprite, and it sets these numbers based on the center point. So if you have a larger sprite, then the center is going to be at a possibly different position relative to like the sprite's feet. So wherever you want the sprite's feet to be, put them there, and then look at what the Y position is. I want something in like the -90s. But yours might be different. So if Y position is greater than -92, that means it's in the air. And if that's true, I want to change the Y speed by -1. Because I want that number that was causing it to go up when it was positive, I want it to go down, because we just do some setting Y speed here. When Y speed is positive, it goes up. When Y speed is negative, it goes down. Right, so I want to set it to a positive number at first, so it goes up. But then once it's in the air, I want it to gradually start to come down. That's how gravity really works. When you throw a ball up in the air, it goes fast at first, and then it slows down until it reaches sort of the top of its rise, and then it starts to gradually accelerate downwards. So it's a little bit slow at first, but then it falls faster and faster and faster. So that's what's going to happen here. If it's in the air, it's going to start moving. It's going to start slowing down. Eventually, it's going to stop and start falling down. And then it'll start falling faster and faster and faster because the Y speed will be getting more and more negative. So if I add this, and now I jump, it looks, like it jumps and falls. Now we have another problem though. The Y speed is stuck at -14, so it keeps falling all the way through the floor. So I need to add yet another additional condition, and that is, let me grab this temporarily. I need to change this to an if-else. So I want this to go up if the Y position is greater than the floor. I want this this Y speed to go down, to become more negative, if the Y position is greater than the floor until it hits the floor. Once it hits the floor, I want this to stop. I want it to reset back to 0 so it stops moving. So I'm going to have to get an if-else instead. And put a set Y speed to 0 here. So now it jumps, but it stops when it gets to the floor. Watch the Y speed. it's positive, then it becomes negative, right? It kind of zeroes out at the top of the jump, and it becomes more and more negative till it's the floor, and then it zeroes out again. Which is exactly what we want. Now, be careful the order that you put these things in. The order really does matter. I'm pretty sure. Let me just test this out. Yeah. Like, for example, if you have your space key happening first, this will just zero it out, and it won't go anywhere. So make sure you have your space key pressed after gravity. Right? You have to get it up in the air first before gravity. Or sorry, you have to get it up in the air and then have the change happen. It's just so that gravity doesn't kick in like this, so that this else block doesn't kick in immediately and just cancel out your jump. So make sure that you have them in this order. First gravity, then space key press. So all right, we've got a decent sort of simulation of gravity. Notice that the animation is way smoother, and it looks a lot more realistic, or at least like realistic cartoon, sort of like realistic video game motion. We still have a little bit of a problem. If I press and hold the space key, it just flies away. So that's another thing we're going to have to add as an extra condition that checks to see not only was the space key pressed, but was it actually on the floor? Like, was it, if you jump, you can't just keep jumping once you're in the air. You can't just like double jump. And I think I want the sprite to have the same, kind of realism, which if you jump, you can't just keep jumping in midair. So in addition to checking if the space key is pressed, I'm also going to check to see if my character is on the floor. So I want to add an AND block so that I can check for an additional condition. Both of these things will have to be true. So if space key is pressed and my sprite is on the floor, so and Y position is less than negative one. Where is it right now? Looks like it's at negative 110. It's interesting. You'll probably have to do a little bit of trial and error with the Y positions that cause gravity to engage and that act as the floor, because with the way the Y speed variable works, it's kind of moving in sort of sporadic jumps of not exactly the same amount every time, and you might end up settling on different numbers than you might think. Your numbers might vary from mine. It might take a little bit of trial and error. So it looks like it's actually starting to settle when it jumps in a different place than it was before. Let me just try. So for a floor, let me say if space key is pressed and the Y position is less than, I guess technically it's still less than negative 90, or, less than negative 92, right? Let's see if that works. Yeah, that still works. And can I double jump? I can't, right? If I try to press and hold space, it doesn't work. I'm holding space right now, and it just waits till it gets back down to the floor. So it's currently doing what I expect it to do. That's good. So we've got working gravity, got working jumping. When you press the space key, it checks also right here to see if the Y position is low enough for the sprite to be on the floor before it actually sets the Y speed to a positive number. So that's good. Now let's add one more layer of complication. The game that you're going to make is going to need to have platforms. So in order to have platforms, first I'll need to draw one. I'm just going to make my platforms a simple black bar. Like it's just going to be, let's see, I just want to fill. No outline, I don't think. I don't really need an outline. I just want to have a simple black rectangle. All right, make sure it's centered. Whenever you draw a sprite, make sure that the center X on the sprite is lined up with the center dot. So that, I mean, assuming you want it to be like that. I think for most sprites, you want the center point to be accurate. I think I need to make this a little smaller. That should be good. I think I need to make my sprite a little smaller too. You know, I could try clicking on the right thing. There we go. All right, so what I want to be able to do is to be able to jump, and when it lands on this platform, it just stays there. So what I'm going to do is actually pretty much treat the color black like a floor. The reason I'm going to use color is the same reason I used color for the World's Hardest Game, which is there's going to be a whole bunch of these items, and rather than check for every individual item, it's going to be way easier to say, does it match a color? So I'm just going to check to see if along with is it on the floor when I try to jump, also is it is it touching a platform? So when the space key is pressed, one of these conditions has to be true. So this and stays here, right? If the space key is pressed and it's possible to jump, right? Think of this as if the space key is pressed and it's possible to jump, right? One way it can be possible to jump is this right here. The Y position is, less than the floor point. Another way it could be possible to jump is if you're on a platform. So I'm going to add an or because it's an either or. It could be one or the other. It doesn't have to be both. It could just be one or the other. Either you're on the ground or you're up in the air but you're on a platform. So I'm going to say or touching color. I'm going to sample this exact shade of black because I only want it to match the platform. So now it's still falling. Problem is gravity. Gravity hasn't accounted for this yet. I could actually jump off of it if I hold the space bar because it can jump off a platform, but right now gravity isn't switching off. So I still need gravity to switch off. I still need gravity to switch off or just sort of not engage when touching a platform. So in addition, I need this right here. If Y position is greater than negative 92, that's if the sprite is off the floor, that's when gravity turns on. And additionally, the sprite is not, this is not block. The sprite is not on a platform, so not touching black. All right, so both of these things have to be true for gravity to switch on now. It used to just be one thing. It used to just have to be in the air. Now it's two things. Sprite has to be in the air and not on a platform, right? This means in the air. This means not on a platform. So if the sprite is in the air and not on a platform, now it lands on the platforms. So you can jump and land on platforms. And so that is everything you're going to need to know to get this game to work. I do want to point out one additional thing that is a really useful skill and will be required in the it'll be required to demonstrate it in the platform game project, which is using custom blocks, using the My Blocks, the pink blocks that you can make yourself. That's just because as programs start to get a little bit more complicated, it gets to be important to sort of organize your code a little bit better. So as an example, I'll just demonstrate, for example, taking everything related to gravity and just putting it in one block. So let's say I just make a block called gravity. What I can do is I can define what gravity does. Let me zoom out a little bit. And everything that gravity does is in this block right here. Right, so this is the definition of gravity. Now what I can do, instead of having all of this in my main code, is I can just say gravity. So just check gravity. So now I've got motion, I've got gravity, and I've got jumping. It still works, right? I can still jump. And I can still land on things. But it's just when I read my main code, this complication is removed from it. I could do that with other things too. I could create a separate function to handle left-right motion. I'm calling these custom blocks functions because that's a term that most programming languages use for these sorts of named pieces of code that do a specific task like this. They're typically called functions. And then, so that you'll notice, right? All I did was group that stuff together, give it a name, and it still works the same way. It's just kind of bundled together all in one place. And I'll just do the same thing with jumping. So now I have a highly simplified main code, right? My main script. Everything is working exactly the same way. But if you look at my main script, it just says, forever handle left-right motion, handle gravity, handle jumping, change y by y speed, right? If you want to know what any of these things do, you go to their definition. So if something doesn't work with left-right motion, check left-right motion. If something doesn't work with jumping, check jumping, and so on. So that's really all you need to know for any new skills to make this work. Hope this helps. Good luck with your platform game.